work for the long haul?
Well, when we started our community, it was in about 1995, 1996, we came out of a student movement. So we had all this fire, and stuff coming out. We were ready to change the world, listening to Tracy Chapman.
I sing that.
Sorry if you don't know that song. I know you are. But and then we thought, we just need this vision. And our vision, as we started the simple way, was to love God, love people, and follow Jesus. And we said, if we can do that, that's great, And so we moved in with a bunch of us, and we were like, we'll just love each other. And that was awesome for about 2 weeks. And then, you start going, I think we need to have some other things in place, because we're trying to create, in a lot of ways, an environment that's countercultural, and where we're valuing things like community over independence, and some of those things that aren't taught to us by our culture. And so we really came to a point where we had to create some structures for community. And we describe structures for community like the trellis of a garden, right? Where if you don't have some kind of structure, like a trellis for your tomato plants, then your tomatoes just kind of rot on the ground, But if you have too much structure, then it does the opposite of free it up. It suffocates it. It doesn't allow it to grow. So I think all of us have to figure out what are the things that we need in place to make sure that we take care of each other, and that we're creating an environment that it's easier to be good, and easier to be the kind of people that God wants us to be. So some of those things that we used to call them non-negotiables, and I think that's it's a little polarizing. We call it the essentials, but the essentials, you got to figure out some of those things so you can preempt some of the conflicts you're going to have. I mean, probably want to go ahead and talk about whether or not you're going to have alcohol, and whether or not people can sleep together in the same bed if they're not married. Stuff like that, I think, is really good conversation to make sure that we have some structures and some ways of living in place for ourselves. And I think a lot of us that have come out of sort of an oppressive, legalistic Christianity, don't drink, don't smoke, don't do all these things. Like, we move in, there's a tendency to move into sort of this liberalism of anything goes. We just want to be a safe place. We're a radical community, whatnot. And then, if you're not careful, you end up with a very sloppy community. And at the core of disciple is discipline. So we've got to create some of those holy habits that allow us to cultivate the kind of disciples that we want to. So that's and it is a challenge with Jesus' story that he says when you throw out the seeds, and there's those seeds that they burst up and they have they're beautiful, but then they die because they don't have any roots. So we need to keep our communities rooted in the footsteps that have gone before us, and those movements like John Perkins, who's here. John is an incredible leader in the Catholic worker movement, the different renewals that throughout history have been incredible movements in the church that we can learn from. So on the one hand, we are doing something new and fresh, but it's also something that the Spirit seems to be doing over and over throughout history, is having these renewals and community movements that start. So we have a lot to learn from them.
Yeah, and there are people that seem to emerge at the front of these things, Dr. Perkins or Francis or Mother Teresa. I don't know if you've learned from looking at some of their lives how they handled the attention that they didn't ask for. I mean, it was foisted upon them. Some of that is being foisted upon you, getting asked to do all sorts of stuff. How do you walk out that place of being recognized? I think of people like Rich Mullins, who told his accountant, don't tell me how much I'm making. I'm going to live in a trailer on a Navajo reservation, and I just don't want to know the rest. I wonder if you've learned stuff by thinking about or learning from Mother Teresa or Dr. Perkins or others about how to kind of walk out that being known, being a voice, without it derailing like what Jesus wants to do with you, Shane Claiborne.
That's awesome. That's a good question.
One of the things that I notice about the people I really admire throughout church history is that they've had communities around them. Every person that you name, John, Mother Teresa, Dorothy Day, like Rich Mullins, and so many other people, I think, in different cultures and environments and contexts, that they've had these communities around them that they're accountable to, you know? And Jesus sends the disciples out in pairs for a reason, you know? And I think it's that accountability that we're not to be alone. We're to be transparent and accountable with each other. Rich Mullins, at one point, he said, I was really stumbling when I was on the road, you know? And I went he said he went to his spiritual director and he was talking to him and said, I feel like so weak because I keep messing up, you know, and things like that. And his spiritual director said, no, it's not that you're weak. You're just not meant to be alone that much. You know, you need to be traveling with other people. And part of the reason I travel with other folks is so that I'm able to share life, and it also affects the way that you share the story too. You know, community kind of keeps you honest. Because then I'm like, and then we raised 3 people from the dead. You know, I'm like, it wasn't 3 people. It was only 2. You know,
They were just very sad.
Man.
But I think that's really important. So I have a group of folks that keep me honest and ask me hard questions. Even the amount that I travel, I submit to our community. All the money that comes in from speaking and writing books comes before our community, and we give it most of it away or use it in the neighborhood. And it is beautiful. Rich did that. You know, Rich Mullins, he committed to live off the average worker's wage and to give everything else away. John Wesley did even more than that, actually. Lived in pretty desperate poverty. I think it was about it was like 30 pounds a year that he was living off of, which was pretty easy when he was only making 30 pounds a year, you know, or whatever it was. But then he started making more and more, and he ended up giving what his equivalent of, I heard from a Methodist scholar, like almost $17 million, like away. Because he still lived off of that same wage. So I think that's part of this kind of securities we want to put in place so that we have integrity as we speak, and we don't let the influence or whatever kind of hijack where we're headed, you know.
And what about spiritual direction? I mean, is there someone who's sort of pouring into you that you come under, someone that has that sort of authority? And how would you advise these guys as they're thinking about learning